Let's talk about an ancient Chinese philosopher named Zhuangzi. His ideas are, well, they're pretty strange, but they are also shockingly modern. He basically takes everything we think we know about success and happiness and just flips it completely upside down. So let's dive into his weird and wonderful world.
Okay, so to really get where Zhuangzi is coming from, we first have to look at what he would call the normal way of living. Just think about it for a second. What are the things that we are all taught to chase after in life?
And that's exactly the question Zhuangzi throws out there. What do most people spend their entire lives running after, convinced that this is the stuff that will finally make them happy? I bet you can already guess the answers.
And yep, there they are. Riches, a good reputation, a long life. The world loves physical comfort, right? Good food, fancy clothes, beautiful things to look at, great music to listen to. I mean, this is pretty much the standard definition of the good life. This is the goal we're all supposed to be sprinting towards.
But here's the big twist. Zhuangzi says that this constant chase, this nonstop striving for more, is actually the root of all our anxiety. He's saying that the moment we're born into this mindset, we're also born into sorrow, because we're always worried about getting this stuff and absolutely terrified of losing it.
So, if that conventional path is just a recipe for anxiety, where do we find real wisdom? Well, Zhuangzi didn't find it where you'd expect, not in palaces or in stuffy classrooms. He found it in the most unlikely places, and from the absolute strangest teachers you can imagine. Let's kick things off with one of his most famous stories. So, picture this. Zhuangzi is traveling, and he comes across an old, bleached skull on the side of the road. Now, most of us would probably just walk on by, maybe a little creeped out. But not Zhuangzi. He stops to have a chat.
He actually taps on the skull and starts asking it all these questions. He's basically hitting all of our deepest fears about life and death. You know, did you end up here because you were too greedy? Did you mess up and ruin your country? Did you do something shameful? Did you die poor and alone? He's pretty much asking, so did you fail at the game of life?
And then the skull answers him in a dream, and its reply is just, wow, it completely turns everything on its head. The skull says that, in death, there are no bosses, no employees, no seasons, no worries. There's just this perfect, timeless calm, an enjoyment that is actually greater than anything a king could ever experience. All of a sudden, death isn't this terrible failure. It's a kind of ultimate peace.
Now stick with me, because that wild idea leads us to another one of Zhuangzi's strange but brilliant lessons. This one challenges our whole idea of what it means to be useful or valuable.
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? A straight, strong tree is considered useful for lumber. A well with clean, fresh water is useful for drinking. But here's the thing, because they are seen as useful, they're the first ones to be used up, to be exploited, and ultimately to be destroyed. Their so-called value is what leads directly to their downfall.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's this wild paradox. By being useless in the eyes of the world, you know, like a twisted, gnarled tree that no carpenter wants, you find a much greater, much truer kind of usefulness. And what's that? It's survival. It's the freedom to just live out your natural life in peace, without the world trying to chop you down for its own purposes.
All right, so we've got a happy skull and a useless tree. How in the world do these ideas fit together? Well, it's all about learning to see our own lives as just one small part of a much bigger, natural process.
And that big, natural process is what Zhuangzi called the Tao. The best way to think of it is like the great flowing river of the universe. It's the underlying rhythm that connects everything. It's not a god or some guy in the sky. It's just the natural, spontaneous, always changing way of things.
And seeing things this way totally reframes what it means to be alive. Your life, according to Zhuangzi, isn't something you own. It's more like a temporary loan from the universe. It's just a phase. So fighting against that, clinging to life and being terrified of death, it's like the daytime being afraid of the nighttime. It's pointless, and it just causes a ton of anxiety because you're fighting the natural flow.
So when you lay it all out, you're looking at two totally different paths in life. There's the world's way, which is all about chasing riches and fame, constantly striving and being anxious about it all. And then there's the Taoist way, which is about letting go, focusing on your inner self instead of your reputation, accepting change, and seeing life and death as just two sides of the same coin.
So this brings us to the final, and maybe the toughest, question of all. If we're not supposed to be chasing after wealth and fame and all that stuff the world tells us is important, then what are we supposed to do? Where does real happiness, what Zhuangzi calls great enjoyment, actually come from?
And here is his incredible answer. Now, when he says doing nothing, he doesn't mean just being lazy and sitting on the couch. Not at all. He means acting without all that desperate striving, acting without fighting against the current of the Tao. It's about putting down the oars, stopping that endless anxious struggle to force life into a box, and instead finding this deep, real joy and just flowing with it.
And that brings this ancient idea right back to you right now. Is your enjoyment found in that frantic chase for things the world tells you are valuable? Or could it be found somewhere else entirely? In a place with a lot less striving and a lot more just being? Zhuangzi leaves us with that question. Where are you going to find your great enjoyment?